Hello, welcome to Mosque Renewal, the place where we engage, interpret, and renew the Islamic tradition from a place of empowerment. Sorry that we're late this week. We were at Plymouth Congregational, like we always are, on Saturdays, 6 to 8, but we couldn't film a video last week. We couldn't film a video on Saturday, so we're filming it today, which is Wednesday, and we'll still be hosting a discussion on Saturday, but we'll get more to that at the end. So what is discussion about this week?
This week we're talking about really Islam's relationship to other relationships or other religions, and whether Islam is the true religion or a true religion, I think was the question that we posted for our discussion title.
Yeah. So I think we can jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to go first?
Okay. Because of my upbringing and my friendships, I kind of feel like all of the Abrahamic faiths are true religions. I can't say Islam is the only correct one, just because there is so much in common between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, especially Judaism. My best friend is a Jew, and they sometimes call me a Jewslim just because of how much our two different religions overlap. We have a lot of, our dietary rules come from Judaism. They come from God, but it's just so incredibly similar. Like, our holy books are almost identical. A lot of, the different, and this comes from Hebrew and Arabic both being Semitic languages, but, a lot of our names for God are also incredibly similar. What that said, I haven't really thought about a whole lot about Islam's relationships to other religions, such as Buddhism or Hinduism. I've basically only ever thought about it because of my personal experience with the other Abrahamic faiths, just through friendships with a lot of Jews and my own Christian Catholic upbringing.
Yeah.
So I think everything has a grain of truth. It just,
Yeah, I can say one of the things I love doing is finding God in everything as much as possible. Like, sometimes even in pop music, I'll be like, how can I see God in this? So definitely I think it's easy to find God in religion. And to the extent, I sometimes don't understand how people are like, they're all so different. And it's true, all the religions are very, very different, but so much of them are, the same. I don't know. To me, it's an expression of Tawhid. And theologically speaking, of course, in the Quran, we're taught that God has sent many prophets. And some of them we hear the names of, and some of them we don't. So definitely in the Abrahamic tradition, we know the names of the prophets. You have from Adam on down. But even when Islam came, it expanded the repertoire of prophets that were talked about. There are prophets that are talked about in the Quran that are not talked about in the Old Testament or in the New Testament. And so when I think of other religions, for example, here's a great example actually. When I first read the Quran, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita at the same time. And so it was interesting. I was in New York City, and I honestly don't remember exactly how this happened, but I was going to the Islamic Center at NYU, which was the college I went to. But at the same time, I had found this Hare Krishna group that met on Saturdays, and there was this one line in the Quran that kept sticking out to me. It says, "Bow down and worship with those that bow down." And when I walked into the Hare Krishna service, for those of you who are not familiar with Hare Krishnas, the way I like to think of religions is that each religion has its primary form of worship. And it doesn't mean it's the only form of worship, but each one has a primary one. So Islam would be the praying of the 5 times a day, whereas you might say Buddhism would be meditation. Well, for Hare Krishnas, it's chanting and singing the name of God. And when I walked into that service, I was such in a great open place. It felt great to be there and to worship God and to sing to God. And I was like, that's perfect. That's great. I can do that. And I wanted to learn more from these Hare Krishna monks and lay people who were there studying. They're like, oh, well, we have a Bhagavad Gita study it was maybe every Saturday or something like that. I forget what it was. So I ended up reading the Bhagavad Gita at the same time that I read the Quran. And it's just, first of all, it's a great scripture. Talks about the nature of humanity to God. I really love the fact that it's, I think it's one of the Upanishads, which were commentaries on the Vedas, which are even older, and the Vedas being like the oldest thing that we have been passed down of human literature, and the Vedas are all about God, humans' relationship with God. And then the reason it's called Hare Krishna, Krishna is similar to the Christian tradition. Krishna is a prophet. At least I see Krishna as a prophet. He was a human being that lived. Funny thing, like, he was apparently so dark-skinned that people said his skin was like had a blue tint, which is why it's often depicted as blue in Hindu art. And then what has seemed to me happened over time is that, like has happened with other prophets that we could name, he eventually was like replaced just kind of a more abstract understanding of God. So like when you so in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking with God's authority and with God's voice. And yet I can still see God in that, So I do not think Islam is the only true religion. I think we can definitely get into the weeds of like, did Islam clear out or attempt to clear out some of the bad or mistaken understandings that had like accreted on these religious traditions over time? Definitely. And I think sometimes Muslims have a sense of superiority, like, those other religions were true, but then the followers of those religions went wrong in this belief and that belief. But then I like to think with humility, well, it's been how many years since like the Prophet lived, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and by now Islam has also probably acquired a bunch of
what is it, fitna is what they call the innovations or whatever. That when I first converted, that was something that I was taught I should never do. I should never interpret on my own because it could lead to innovation and it could lead to me changing something from what was taught.
Though I think we should be pretty transparent that descends from like Wahhabist creed and understanding of Islam, and not necessarily like that's just part of all.
No. That definitely comes from my. Well, I'm not going to give my opinion. Definitely comes from the Wahhabi school, which is Wahhabi and Salafi are the prevalent schools, at least here in Minnesota, just because of the community that we have. And when I look at what our traditions are now compared to what is when I read the Quran, all I see is innovation. Everything seems so different from what I was taught to what the Quran teaches, and I know, like, human beings are imperfect. Like, there's no way we can be perfect. The only thing that's perfect is God. So in our own lifetime, like, we're going to change things and we're going to stray from the path, and that's really what I think all about Islam is finding your way back to the path and doing everything you can to get yourself back on the path. Because your relationship with God is like so personal, and that actually comes from Christianity. Like me being raised, going to Catholic church with my grandma, I was always taught like your relationship with God is super personal. What you do is like what you do, and that's why you can't ever say that somebody else's religion is not true.
Yeah, I find grounding in that understanding as well. In Islam, that your relationship is personal. I think back in an earlier video I said that's like one of the things I like about Islam is this idea that there's no intercession for you with God. Yeah. That on the day of judgment, like, it's just you and God and your record of what you have done. Yeah. Now I know there's
That
like a
conversation's gonna take a
whole.
long time for me.
I know there's like a whole tradition that I'm not super versant in actually, where Sufis
Yeah.
they believe in intercession in some way. I don't exactly know what that is. We can maybe
Yeah.
get into it at some point.
Hasana, I think, would be a good person to talk to, have a conversation with about that.
Yeah, but
We'll get her in and talk about that.
putting that aside for the moment, I have experienced in my life a deepening of my relationship with God. This idea of it being one on one. That ultimately, the only person who can kind of set me right is God. Like religions are can be these beautiful vehicles and guideposts and everything, like there to facilitate helping you develop this relationship, but the relationship itself
Yeah.
is not any of the religions. And
Yeah.
and so there is a interesting concept, a concept that's foundational to me from Christianity, or at least from the New Testament, which says you will know them by their fruits. And to me, one of the reasons I can't denounce other people's religions, part of it, I think it would just lead to an unjust world. We have seen
Yeah.
religious bigotry lead to injustice. But even on a personal level, when I see people manifesting fruits of what I call fruits of the Spirit, like compassion, generosity, being justice oriented and justice minded, being brave in the right ways. Like when I see a person manifesting those things, and they have been led and to manifest those things from a different tradition than mine, am I going to say, well, it's just a fluke,
Yeah.
and their religion is false, but my religion is perfect, even though like there are some people in Islam who manifest those beautiful fruits of the Spirit, and there are some that definitely do not.
Yeah.
So the truth of someone's religion, I think, is found in the quality of their moral character, and you find upright moral people in every religious tradition, at least that I have seen.
Yeah.
Like both past and present. And then just kind of as a personal metaphor, I'm a teacher, and I'm expected to differentiate for all of my students. Now it's an impossible task for a human being to differentiate for every single individual in my room when I have like 30 students. And yet we keep trying, and we understand that it's important because every person needs something different in order to reach whatever goal we're trying to get them to. If I, as a human being, can be held responsible for differentiating for 30 people, are we really saying that God is incapable of differentiating God, like the paths available to human beings in the world, across all of the differences that God will have to deal with in order to guide us? Differences of our age, differences of our culture, the time periods in which we were born in, like our languages. Like, I don't know, that seems blasphemous to be like, God can't do that. God only sent down one religion in one way in one language.
Right.
Like,
I know I brought this up before in one of our non-recorded conversations where, who am I? Like, God is God. Like, God is this, like, all-knowing, omnipotent, like, God. God very well could have shown their face to different places in different ways. Like, how do we know that the hundreds of deities in Hinduism aren't all just different faces of God? I think that God shows a different side of himself depending on how the culture developed. So like Native American, indigenous populations, they have their creator, but they also saw the holiness in the land around them. I'm speaking generally about specifically the indigenous population of Minnesota, which is what I've studied the most. But when I look at nature, I also see God, because none of this would be possible without God. And so, like, who am I to say some lowly human some lowly, like, fallible human, that God isn't the say it's not the same God in every single religion, just showing a different side of themselves depending on the area of the world and the culture.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense at all.
I mean, and like I think I said in our last video, I believe in the greater unity of God.
Yeah.
Like when you can say there is one God, and it's this specific one, and there's no others, and all those others are false. So you can say there is one God. So even though I don't understand how you have interpreted or understood God in your culture, I can trust God, basically.
Yeah.
I can trust God, and I can trust that God is working as
God does.
To. Yeah. But let's introduce some controversy, like for those who would push back, like because you seem to have similar kind of orientations. But let's push back a little bit.
Which is why we get along so well.
All right. So to your question of how can we know that all these other gods that Hindus worship or that anyone else's worship are not God, and we'd be like, well, the Quran tells us so. And let's bring up the most controversial one. It says that Jesus is not God, and it says it over and over again. So when we say, oh, we should have some tolerance for those Christians who believe in Jesus as God, but the Quran says we should not. So, like, what's your response in that case?
Well, Christians believe that Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the Jewish prophecies of the foretold Messiah. And that is where Jesus gets his name. He's the Messiah of the Jewish prophecies. Many people have probably heard of the Council of Nicaea, which was a long time ago. I can't remember the year. But it was this council.
I think it was either in the 200s or the 400s.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 400s, actually, because the 200s was, I'm going to say 400s.
Yeah, I think it was in the it was around, it was a really long time ago. We'll go with that. In the early days of Christianity, when we had all of these different sects, like the Gnostics, and you had like the various cults, like the cult of Mary Magdalene, and you had all of these different gospels floating around, like there was no standardized Bible, and a lot of the more mainstream groups believed that if Jesus is the Son of God, then that makes Jesus God. He's like God Jr. Sorry. And I may have been guilty of calling him that on occasion in my Christian days. Oh yeah, we've got God and God Jr., and then we've got like the random ghosty thing over there. But that always was weird to me because I don't really ever remember Jesus saying that he was God. He wasn't God. He was a rabbi. He was a teacher.
Even in the Gospels written by other people after his death.
Yeah, he doesn't really say that he is God, and that was always my issue. Like, why would... Like, sure, he may have fulfilled a lot of the prophecies, but, like, why does that all of a sudden make him the same footing as God? You can be a gift of God and a blessing from God, but you don't have to be God. So back to the Council of Nicaea. So the Council of Nicaea took the concept of divinity of Jesus and made that official church doctrine. And a lot of the sects of Christianity that didn't believe that kind of got squashed. Yeah. And so a lot of the diversity of belief went away.
To answer my own question as if I was answering someone who was like, but what would you say? I would say, I think there are two levels, and I actually want to start to differentiate these because I think it's important for the mosque renewal and for having any conversation in which there's controversy.
Yes.
So, before I even get to the theology, I want to say, one, we're human beings and we're fallible, and our greatest responsibility before God is to treat others as we want to be treated, or to want for our neighbors what we want for ourselves.
Exactly.
So regardless of what we may disagree on, even if I fundamentally disagree with you and think that, like, God's going to prove me right on Judgment Day, inshallah, God willing, I may be wrong, God knows best.
Yeah.
Still with your humility, but like you really, really strongly believe that this other person is just wrong about how they are understanding Islam, how they're understanding Christianity, how they're understanding anything. It does not in any way lessen your responsibility to treat that person with respect, with justice, with compassion, like that's like it does not matter
Yeah.
what you believe to be wrong. Your responsibility in that situation is the same, unless that person is oppressing you
Mm-hmm.
in some way. And like, I know there are levels of oppression, but I mean like really like keeping you from living your life
Yeah.
due to their beliefs and their willingness to impose them on you. Your responsibility for treating someone with respect and compassion is not less in any way. So like, it does not matter if I disagree with Christians about this. Like, I can disagree, but I must also always do so in a respectful
Mm-hmm.
manner, and also be reminded that hey, I may be wrong, because only
Yeah.
God knows, right? Theologically speaking, I do, as a Muslim, think that Christians who believe that Jesus is God are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I find interesting is that some Christians that I've talked to don't realize that Islam came after Christianity. They think
Yeah.
it's like, because it has so much in common with Judaism.
Yeah.
But like, if you trace it, it's because Islam is kind of a not necessarily a reaction, but kind of a response to Christianity being like, hey, you went a little too far, bring it back.
Yeah.
Like, if you, instead of seeing them as three different religions, if you just see it as one Abrahamic faith, where it's like, here we had the people who got the law, and then they kind of started to forget the spirit of the law.
Mm-hmm.
You had someone come and be like, the law is important, but you need the spirit too. Like, it's
Yeah.
not enough to just check off boxes.
Yeah.
You have to do it with the right intention, with the right heart. So I'm coming to you to remind you of that. And then people start to like really get into the spirit of it, so much so that they're like, you know what, this person who taught us this is as good as God. And
Yeah.
someone goes like, wait,
Hold on a minute.
we went a little too far. Also, now you're not following any laws.
Yeah.
So let's reintroduce some of those laws and regulations. Those are important. Like, they're important for structuring your life. They help you develop the right heart. They help you develop the right intention. And also, please remember, there's only one God. Even this person who was really
Mm-hmm.
wise and was sent from God is still just a messenger of God. Like, that's kind of the story that I
Yeah.
understand of the Abrahamic religion.
Yeah.
Of the Abrahamic religions. And so I disagree with Christians who say that Jesus is God.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how it happened, like,
Mhm.
historically speaking, because, you know, even though Muslims like to be superior, like, well, we never thought that any human being was God. We don't think Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon Muhammad and Jesus, for that matter,
Mhm.
is God. We actually had the exact same debate, except it wasn't about the Prophet. It was about the Quran.
Yeah.
And we had the debate being like, well, is it a created thing or is it co-eternal with God? And our religion, for the most part, the majority of people sided with the Quran is co-eternal with God, which is
Yeah.
exactly what happened with Christians who believe that their prophet was co-eternal with God. So it's not like we are any less
No.
like fallible to the same fundamental error.
Yeah.
So I don't say, like, I think Christians are wrong with, like, the sense of superiority. I just
No.
say, theologically, it has never made sense to me for
Yeah.
Jesus to be God. Like, I believe that Jesus was the Word of God, like, the
Mhm.
embodied Word of God. Like, if other prophets brought some sort of, like, scripture, like, Jesus was the scripture. And by
Yeah.
looking at his very life and existence, you can learn how to walk God's path.
Mhm.
That I think I think that's why he's unique in the Abrahamic religions, but I do
Right.
not think he
I
is
feel
God.
like I definitely fall into the camp where he is a gift of God, but not to the point where he becomes divine, because his life, he was this beautiful follower of God and God's law and preaching the word of God, and re-educating. I really hate that word. Damn you, Dragon Age. Ben Hasrath. Sorry, video game nerd. Really educating his community on, like what you said, like the spirit of the law. So, like, I fully, like, gung-ho about him being a gift because he was a gift. Like, his life was beautiful. He taught love and respect and peace and trusting your neighbor and, community and all of these things that we, charity to the poor, like all these things that we really need to get behind. But he's not God. And he's not equal to God. It's the same, like Abraham's not equal to God, Ishmael's not equal to God, Jesus not equal to God, Muhammad's not equal to God. I don't think the Quran is equal on this whole plane. The Quran is a created work by a prophet, in my opinion. To preface that there, is a created work by a prophet writing down God's word. It was not God writing down the word himself. If God wrote the word himself, then we can say that, I feel like we can say the Quran is coexistent with God. But it wasn't. It was written down actually, 100 years after Muhammad died? I mean, he orally told it, and people wrote it down afterwards. So obviously, when things are transmitted orally, generation to generation, things change. So we don't really even know if what we have is the same thing that Muhammad taught.
Yeah, and I'm gonna push back on that one a little bit, only because I think Western traditions and Western culture tends to devalue the ability of people to pass things down orally. So even if I completely believe that this is a different conversation, I think we should have an entire conversation about how we understand the Quran. But I personally believe that it was faithfully orally transmitted until it was written down. However, understanding just language, how language functions in human society,
Well, language changes so much. I studied linguistics in college, and my favorite classes that I took were the history of language, and where we studied English from Old English all the way down to modern, and went through all of the different changes in word meanings, syntax, how it's spoken and pronounced. The same thing with Arabic and with Hebrew and with Greek. There's a huge difference between modern Greek and ancient Greek. Same country, language changes.
And we see there's an acceleration of that language change in our society because of the internet
and globalization.
But here's this story that I always love when I think about the relationship of different religions in the world. And I believe this is a book, actually. So definitely go check it out if you can. I've never read the book, but I love this story. So it's a story about a two-dimensional prophet.
Yes.
So if you can imagine that this prophet, there's a whole world that exists just drawn on paper. There are stick figures and such and such. And there's this two-dimensional person who's walking through this world, and then God plucks them up from the paper and shows them a three-dimensional world. And to this prophet, to this person, it's incredible. He has never been up before. There's no such dimension as up. So this is the first time he's experiencing up, and he's experiencing this entire three-dimensional world, and then he goes back to his two-dimensional world, and he has to explain what he saw. And how do you do that? How do you explain to a two-dimensional creature what a three-dimensional world is like? So when I think of the religions, I imagine all of these people, these prophets, have seen something beyond what we understand, and then have to come back and try to explain it to us. And the only way they can do that is with metaphor, and all metaphors are culturally and linguistically bound.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, is how you get very different accounts of what the afterworld is like, what heaven is like, what the spirit world is like, any of these things that you call it, what they are like, because all these cultures, all these religions are using different metaphors, or using different languages. But I do believe, personally, that they're all trying to describe the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Same.
Can we think of any? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty, but can we think of any other real if we had someone here who disagreed with this, what would they say?
I can think of a lot of things. But most of them would be things that trolls would say, and they are not appropriate for this video.
Is there anything that you think has substance, like that someone would really struggle with and be like, I don't know, this is what I've been taught my whole life?
Well, I mean, I think, especially here in Minnesota, with considering how like Christian and especially Lutheran we are, would be the whole like divinity of Jesus and all that. If you like, just because of our demographics.
The Nicene Creed.
Yes.
But,
Nicaea.
I mean, if
Good
you,
times.
those of you, we have Christian watchers like, and Christian watchers who like are like Nicene Creed is so important to me. I'd say,
What's
Islam.
his name? Alexandrius or something like that?
I don't quite remember.
Something like that.
I remember the person who stood against him. Who
Yeah.
Was, actually, I don't. It's either Arius or something like that, but it was the Arian Creed. Not to be confused with the way we use Arian today to mean white supremacy. But the Arian belief that Jesus was not divine. Basically, Islam is like, yeah, we believe in all the things you believe. We just happen to think that one decision
Disagree
was
on
wrong.
that one thing.
Yeah,
basically.
that one thing. Theologically, that's the only difference. Culturally, obviously, Islam developed in a different culture than Christianity, because Christianity got taken up first by Greeks and then by Romans, and then like primarily developed in Europe. The Christianity that we see today, certainly in Minnesota, was developed in Europe, and Islam was developed
So German.
in
So German, Minnesota.
Don't forget the Norse.
And the Swedes.
Yeah.
I mean, my name is Swedish.
But Islam was obviously developed and influenced by the Middle East and by North Africa. Those are very different cultural gardens to grow up in. But theologically, it's really just kind of that one point where it's like, yeah, we believe in everything except we think not even that Jesus was wrong, peace and blessings of God be upon him, but that the people who lived 400 years after him and encoded in the religion that he was God was wrong. And we believe, and like we respectfully think that decision was wrong, and we like, so that's what I think Muslims. I think that to me would be my advice to any Muslim to have in relation with Christians. Like, we respectfully disagree about the divinity of Jesus.
Right.
Other than that, these cultural traditions, like these religious traditions that you guys have come up with in a couple hundred years, are pretty great. You want to check out some of ours? Like,
Yeah.
But that makes me think. How would you? Do you have any advice or like ways that you think about how you relate with people of other religions? And let's say like people who are your friends. I don't think we should get too deep into it, but like maybe romantic relationships if you're like dating across religious traditions. How do you relate to, like, how does this look in the actual world? How do you relate to people of different religions?
Well, like I said earlier, my best friend is Jewish, and they've come to like mosque services with me, and I've gone to shul, synagogue, Shabbos services with them, and there's actually something really, really beautiful about Jewish Shabbos services, because every week, like, they just go through every week, and so like you can show up, like you don't have to go for like a month, and you can show up and you know exactly what part, of the service they're doing that week, because it's like you move through everything like has a time, which is, I think, really cool, and like there's so much common ground between myself and my best friend that we don't really have these conversations about like things that are different just because we can't find the differences, really. Like the big difference is Muhammad, but other than that, like my old roommate that I had before moving here was Christian, and she's actually the one that I used to go to church with when I was in high school. I've known her since I was 14, and we've had these conversations, but she always came from a place of respect and wanting to learn, and so that's really the big difference. How I react to you all depends on how you're coming at me. If I'm unfortunately a very reactive person. And I say unfortunately because if you come at me and you attack me, I'm going to be snippy and snarky and like give you sarcastic kind of nasty responses about, you know, like I will mimic your tone. And that's something that I'm working on. But if you come at me like respectfully and want to ask about my traditions, like yeah, I'm going to tell you all about it, and then I'm going to ask you questions about what you think, because that's really important to me, to have those respectful and peaceful and let's find the common ground conversations, because I think peace is way more important. Unfortunately, in the work that I do, I encounter way more trolls, and so like I do have this defensive, little bit snarky, when I say a little bit, I mean a lot snarky response that I give.
Yeah.
When I get trolled a lot because of the work that I do, and I tend to go for shock value.
I've definitely had really good experiences in multi-religious spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, to the extent of being with people that I would consider family, and like we found it important to celebrate all the holidays. We would celebrate them all together, you know. So we would all fast together, and we would all like do Christmas together, and we would all do these
I love
things
Christmas.
together. Yeah, like,
Love Christmas.
and then I've also gone out of my way to every once in a while try to go to a service of a different religion. So
Mm-hmm.
like spending the time with the Hare Krishnas. Recently, I've spent a lot of time with Lutherans, and it was great. It was great. It was weird. It was great. Like to me.
Ooh, I'll have to take you to Chabad. Yes, there's a Chabad nearby.
Like, I'm like a amateur religious scholar. I love like studying religion. So when I was there, I was like, what would I think is the primary like worship act of these Christians right now, these Lutheran Christians? And I came up with play acting.
Mm-hmm.
Because like it wasn't necessarily prayer, it was like play acting. It was like if we act out these scenes from the Gospels, we're trying to like put ourselves into this same mindset, like the people who stood outside of Jerusalem and waved palm fronds.
Yeah.
You know, and like that's a holy thing, like connecting you back to that place, that these people who were risking getting killed by the state for supporting this rebel still showed out in mass to like celebrate his arrival to Jerusalem, and we're gonna remember that, and we're gonna wait for our palm fronds. You know, like, it's great. I love it. So I was clearly there around Easter, like Palm Sunday and Easter. So I was like, this is fascinating. I never, like, I grew up in a Christian-dominated society, but I've been away from it for a little. I haven't been away from the society, but I've just been away from engaging in Christianity for a while. So to come back at it from like this different perspective, it was fun. And so I've definitely had those good and positive experiences. I've definitely also had people like even like mild-mannered and nice way be like, "Oh, you chose? Did you grow up Muslim? No. Oh, why'd you choose Islam? You know, the religion of misogyny and hate.
Yeah.
The Quran talks about, you know, the subjugation of women and killing the infidel, and I've read the Quran, so and I'm like,
you've read a different one than I have."
Real, right? And like, so my response to that is always to speak to that point first. That, you know, God says over and over again in the Quran, like, you will understand this to the point that your heart is open to it. And if your heart is closed and cloudy, then all you're going to get out of it is what you expect to see.
Exactly.
So if you, like, to any people who are out there who may be, like, interested in reading the Quran, like, especially from a different tradition, if you're coming at it being like, I heard that Islam was a violent religion that hated the infidels, and I think my religion is better. And then you read the Quran, cool. You will find exactly what you expect to find in it. A religion, and Islam is a terrible religion since that's what you're looking for, that is what you will find.
But it's the same thing with the Bible. Like, if you go look in the Torah and the Talmud, if you go looking through the Old Testament, there's some really scary, like...
Lot's daughters, though. Like, Lot's daughters. Like, we talk about incest. Like, let's not talk about the Old Testament. Let's just move on.
Well, not even that. Like... Like, I mean, it's horribly violent. Like, the stuff that you're supposed to do to people who break the rules. And you can find that in any religion if you go looking for it. Because we're man and we are not perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what God is for, to teach us how to love each other and find, you know, like, new pathways to make community and respect and, like, to care for each other regardless of what we believe.
So this has been one of our longer ones, but I think it was a really good conversation.
Holy cow, 40 minutes.
Yeah. Before we head out, I definitely want to talk up Saturday's event, because so can you tell us what's going to be happening on Saturday?
So on Saturday, in line with our value number 4.
Oh yeah, we've been going through our values. I don't know if we made that clear.
Yes.
Because today was value number 2. We're going to skip 3
for right now.
For right now, we're going to come back to it. And we're going to go to
value number 4 is all about there should be no compulsion in religion, and that God really is your only judge. So this on Saturday, today is Wednesday. So 3 days from now, Saturday, 2 days from now, this weekend, Saturday, we're going to be having hosting a discussion on women specifically women and women identifying people in Islamic spaces. And because there is such a large focus, especially with Islam, on women and these lovely things we wear on our heads.
And what's different about this conversation than any of our other conversations?
Men are welcome to attend, however, their opinion is not
the place for it.
It's not your place.
Yeah.
This conversation is going to be women talking about our experiences, our lived experiences, and the things that we face. And we're not just going to talk about modesty. Like, we're going to talk about Islamic feminism, sexual ethics when it comes to women, our own rights by what's given to us in the Quran, and how what we're actually given, like what our God-given rights as women is, compared to what society, especially Western society, thinks it is, are really different. So we're going to talk about that, and it should be really, really, really interesting. I think we're going to have some really awesome opinions and experiences being shared.
Yeah. So ways to participate in this, obviously, come to Plymouth Congregational Church, corner of Franklin and Nicolet's. We're going to start at 6:15. That's the goal.
Mm-hmm. We need some time to set up the gear.
Yeah, we'll be there from 6 to 8. I'll be there supporting, but I obviously will not be part of the conversation. I'll be listening. You do not have to be on camera if it's something that you want to be part of, but you don't want to, like,
show your face.
Yeah, like, some people will be on camera if they want to be on camera. It's open to you. It's a choice.
Yeah.
If you can attend, if you can't make it into the Twin Cities, please send us, like, your questions or your comments about this, and they will be incorporated into the discussion.
Yep.
As long as we get them before Saturday.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for getting to 42 minutes. It'll probably be 43 or 44 by the time we're done.
Mm-hmm.
This has been Mosque of Renewal. We are at the Plymouth Congregational Church. We are being hosted graciously by the Plymouth Congregational Church, talking about interreligious cooperation right there. Like, that's so important, and we very much appreciate the space that they have given us, and the space that so many churches in the Twin Cities have opened up to other faith groups.
Yep.
So yeah, we're there every Saturday, 6 through 8.
Yep.
And
also, should throw a shout out to All God's Children, Metropolitan Congregational Church in 31st and Park. They graciously gave us free use of their chapel during Ramadan for Maghrib prayers and our fast breaking. and kind of just gave us a place to hang out for a while and make community. They're super great. They do a lot of really awesome things in the community, and their pastor is one of the coolest people I've ever met in my entire life. So, yeah, he's awesome. Okay, so that is it for this week, and we hope you have a good rest of your 4th of July, and we will see you on Saturday.